Hi everyone, I want to welcome you to this week's episode of the Lesson in 5. Lesson in 5 is a weekly program where we summarize the Sabbath school lesson into 5 main points. If you're new around here, make sure you subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our future videos. Today we are beginning a brand new quarter and we are speaking about education. And this week our lesson is education in the Garden of Eden. Imagine that, having your first classroom, having a classroom in a garden. I think I would absolutely love it because I love gardening. And having Christ or God as your instructor, and we being the students with nature as your lesson book. That's exactly what Adam and Eve had. And this week we're going to explore that first classroom in Eden, the first school. When we read in Genesis 2, we find a very intentional setup that God does in the Garden of Eden. He places things very deliberately, meticulously, and intentionally. God had lessons that He wanted Adam and Eve to learn in that first garden. Even the way God gives them responsibility was a way for them to learn. God wanted Adam and Eve to be able to learn more about who He is and see more of His love, have His character revealed to humanity, with the Garden of Eden being the lesson book. Intrusion. After God has created this perfect world, placed man and woman in that garden, then we find a serpent. The serpent comes and deceives Adam and Eve. And you know the story of how the serpent kind of twists the words of God. When you read in Genesis 3, you'll notice there's a slight difference between what the serpent says and what God had ultimately says. You'll also notice that Eve seems to exaggerate the words that God had spoken. And we're going to explore this a little bit later in our lesson. But we see that God had a plan, and then there's an intruder who interferes with God's plan. Unfortunately, our first parents, Adam and Eve, ate the fruit in the middle of the garden which God had told them not to eat. And that brought pain, death, and suffering in the world, missing the message. If you compare the words of Eve in Genesis 3 and the words of God in Genesis chapter 2, when He instructs them not to eat the fruit, you'll notice there's a slight difference. That slight difference may seem minor, but the Bible writer puts it there for us to realize a problem with the attitude of our first parents. They didn't take the instruction of God seriously enough. And we notice that eventually they eat the fruit because the devil has promised them something that they already have. The devil promises that when you eat, you will be like God. But Adam and Eve, when they were created in the likeness and in the image of God. So they were already like God. You know, the devil promises you things that you already have. The devil promises things that he can't give to you. The devil promises things that God has already delivered to you. So when we face temptation, a crucial lesson we can learn is that really the devil has nothing to offer. When we follow Christ, there is nothing to lose and everything to gain. Regaining what was lost. If God's intention in creating humanity and placing them in the garden was for them to be able to learn more about Him, to learn more about His love, His character, and His person, a lot of that has been regained through the plan of salvation. We still have an opportunity to get back to the original plan that God had for humanity from the onset, and this is done by reconciling ourselves with God. This has been done through the sacrifice of Jesus Christ on Calvary. It helps us to realize the ideal that God has for us as His people. The despisers of authority. Adam and Eve have been placed in the garden and they disobey the instruction of God. And Peter has some strong words that he says about people who despise authority. We are called to submit ourselves to the authority of God. We need to realize that when God says something, He's doing it for our good. And we need to guard against despising the authority of the Almighty. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the lesson in 5. If you've enjoyed the lesson in 5, give our video a thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe. Until next week, God bless you all.